Hi, my name is Pastor Kevin Robertson, and welcome to another podcast. Now, this podcast is simply titled, This is My Story. And one of the things that I really enjoy asking people a lot of questions and just listening to their story. Now, I've noticed in my age, when I accepted Christ when I was 4 or 5 years old, my understanding of God was different. And when I became 18, it was different. And when I went through a divorce, it was different. And so throughout our lives, sometimes we discover that our walk with Christ kind of changes a lot, whether it brings us closer or brings us farther away. So I'm going to interview someone that I've known since she was 13 years old. And so I want to welcome Summer. As I knew Summer, her name was Summer Gonzalez, and now it's Summer Reed. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everybody.
Now, I've known you since you were 13 years old. How did I meet you?
I went to Pacific Christian High School, and you were the chaplain at Pacific Christian High School.
Okay, and you were around in ninth grade?
Yes.
Good night. And what year was that? Do you know?
Oh God.
It was like in the early 90s or something.
Early 90s, yep. Because I graduated in 93.
Crazy.
So,
Now, explain your upbringing. You have an older sister and older brothers, but you kind of grew up as an only child, right? In a sense.
Yeah, my siblings are all much older than me. My sister, Lisa, that's closest in age, is 9 years older.
Okay.
My brother, Ron, is 10 years older, and my older brother is much older.
Okay.
So, he grew up in El Paso. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Highland Park.
I did.
And I remember you actually are living in the house that you grew up in.
Yes.
Right. And so, because I remember that, man, you used to have a pool table.
Yep.
In the back. Yeah, in the back. And I just remember that center room in the house where we all hung out and stuff like that. Throughout the year. And so it was a neat house. So tell me about your upbringing. Tell me how you grew up. Tell me about your Fernando and Brenda, your parents.
So my parents married. I was raised Catholic predominantly until I was about 11 years old.
Okay.
And pretty much, with my sister being 9 years older than me, I was pretty much raised alone. She was in the house, but, such a big age gap.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, born and raised in the Catholic Church. And then at about 11, my parents started going to a Christian church here in Highland Park, the Christian Center, and became born again. And an interesting fact, I know some people know Mrs. D from Herman. She was my kindergarten teacher. And so she was the one that pushed my parents to get me into Pacific Christian.
Oh, wow.
So she came telling my parents about Pacific Christian, and that's how I ended up at that school.
Okay, so this is your parents. We were in Mexicali.
Yes, we were in Mexicali.
They're not connected or related to this kid at all.
They're not.
So I just want to be sure. Is that a little brother or something?
Yeah. No, that's my mom and dad.
I when I think of your parents, Fernando and Brenda, they just cracked me up, and I really enjoyed them, and they seemed like they were just happy, and that you had this good life. Now the thing is,
I did a really great life growing up.
You and I have something in common. We went to the same high school.
Yes.
I graduated from the high school in 1981, which is a long time ago.
You're old.
And I know. And then think you are too, Summer. And and then I became the chaplain of the high school. But one of the things that I was really thinking, man, she has a lot of commonality that I have. You had a good friend, or have a good friend. His name is Victor, and you guys kind of met at Pacific Christian High School.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how because this friendship was awesome, I thought. So tell me about the friendship. How you guys met?
We met at Pacific. I think part of it was that his last name was I was Gonzalez. We were always like next to each other. But I don't know. We just had a bond. Kind of. I don't know if it was right from the beginning, but he was just like the sweetest, kindest person, and he stood by me through a lot. And I mean, we fought, we had our days, you know,
Yeah.
but it was a platonic friendship, and but an unconditional love at the same time. So
And see, that's cool because a lot of people don't think you can have a friendship with the opposite sex without you're involved. And one thing that I loved about your story, because it's so similar to my story, is that I have a good friend. Her name is Judy, and we
mhm.
met at the library in Pacific Christian High School.
Wow.
We never got together,
Hmm.
but we went out to dinner with her and some friends 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And so we met in 1978. And so those friendships are just awesome. And I just remember how important, because we fought a lot.
Yeah.
And she was someone that really was an encouragement to me, because I remember I was new at the school. I came in as sophomore in high school.
Uh-huh. Right, right,
And
right.
she was the first one that really accepted me for who I am. And I think that's where the friendships are powerful.
For sure.
So you were part of our youth group, and you went to Mexicali with us too.
More than once.
Did you really?
Yes.
Because Mexicali, you have to understand, we took the youth from Pacific Christian High School. Then we went, our youth group, and then we spent a week in Mexicali. And so if you look at this picture, there's a lot of people here. I would love to
Oh my
interview you,
gosh. Yes.
because Victor is way on your left of this picture, and you're next to him. So
Yep.
obviously you can tell you two are tight.
We were, yeah, thick as thieves. It literally in the classroom, the way the classroom was divided, it had two separate sides, and him and I would put our desks in the middle,
All right.
back, always by ourselves.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So,
We liked
so,
each other just a bit.
so when did you graduate?
Graduated in 1993.
Okay. So the thing is, you grew up in the church. You grew up in the Catholic Church, and at the beginning and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you met a gentleman, Gabriel, and so all of a sudden, I don't know if it was planned. I can't remember, but you became pregnant at a young age.
Not from Gabriel though. Not from my
Okay.
high school boyfriend.
Okay.
Yeah, that was after high school.
Okay. So the thing is, obviously it wasn't planned, or was it planned?
No, it was not
Okay.
planned.
So when you grow up in the church like that, and you're just going, oh, oops, and you just go, okay, what goes through a young person's mind? Like, is it guilt? Is it shame? Is it like, oh my goodness? Or were you excited at the same time?
Scared at the same time. Like I said, I grew up in a home that was so loving. I never doubted that my parents would support me.
Oh, really? Good.
Yeah, I never doubted that. And they did. Of course, my dad was really angry, which is the normal response of a father. But I remember the first time I saw him holding that little girl, he didn't look quite so angry. and he became her sidekick. But I mean, that getting pregnant changed the course of my life.
Right.
And I still went on to make meet a lot of my goals. Just took a lot longer.
Yeah.
But I've had supportive parents the entire time, and I think that's a big key, and a relationship with God.
Right.
Obviously.
Now, the thing is, going from growing up and going through Mexicali and going through all that stuff, and then did your relationship with Christ start changing once you started holding that baby girl and going, oh my
yeah,
goodness.
definitely, and the understanding of the hurt, you know, you've put on your parents is also, um, you know, is also big, is also big. And I've had that experience later on, you know, in life. You know, that baby girl
Right.
uh, ended up getting pregnant, and at a young age, with somebody I wasn't too thrilled about.
Yeah.
And you know, just it just happened. But at the same time, during that time, I remember feeling, oh my gosh, I did this to my parents.
Oh,
The guilt was immense. And I was like having to deal with my daughter being pregnant at the same time. Let me go back and try to, oh my gosh, mom, I'm so sorry that I did this to you.
oh, are you serious? 'Cause
Yeah, I
that
did.
I never thought of that. That's a whole different angle. Like you're the young person that's pregnant, it's telling your mother, and then years later, you're the mother, and your young daughter's telling you the same thing.
Right. And I did go back and apologize to my mom. I said, I am so sorry that I put you through this. Like you know, um, my intent was not to hurt you, but at the same time, me and my husband have tried to be as supportive of my daughter,
Right.
as my parents have been, of me, were of
No,
me.
absolutely. And going back to when you were pregnant, because I remember watching you, I will go through this because usually when somebody becomes a young person becomes pregnant like yourself, you just stereotype that person. Goes, you know what, their life's going to be difficult, and they're going to,
Mhm.
and stuff. But you're right. You did not play victim and
Mhm.
decide, I'm just going to be a mother and I'm going to live off my parents. You went right, you continued college
Mhm.
and you graduated and
Mhm.
stuff, being a single mother. And I know Fern and your mother helped you tremendously
They did.
with raising the child. And you graduated from college.
Yes.
And what do you do now?
I run a child care center for Adventist Health Glendale. I've been with them for over 20 years.
Okay.
So I have a bachelor's in child development.
Okay.
Yeah,
And now let's go back to when you graduated, because Victor, your friend, he graduated from college too,
he did.
because he was going to be a doctor, correct?
He was.
Okay, so to me, because I remember thinking, Victor, a doctor, good night. Sometimes you just remember them in Mexicali or goofing off, and then you're just going, he's becoming a
Mhm.
doctor. Good grief, and I'm just,
Yeah,
faster. And so, do you remember when he told you he became sick?
I do. Um, he called me on the phone and he said, "Hey, I'm in the hospital." I had just seen him not that long before that. I'm in
Mhm.
the hospital. I'd been doing rounds and I'd been sleeping at the hospital and I thought I was just sick and had the flu and run down. And, I'm at City of Hope and I have leukemia.
Wow.
Um, they're pretty sure that it's, this and that, and it'll be treatable. Um, but I need you to know. And I remember just being like, whoa, like you're perfectly healthy. Like, how does this happen? Um,
And how old was he when he was discovered that he had leukemia?
I think must have been 27.
Okay. And so the thing is, going like again, when you're 13 years old, your perspective of God, and you graduate, become a mother, your whole perspective of God. Now your best friend, Victor, who just tells you he has leukemia. Did your prayer life just start immensing very high?
It did. I remember I put going through the Bible and finding verses that would help me to focus on his illness, like on not on his illness, but healing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember putting them in the dashboard of my car. I remember I would go to see him every day, almost every day when he was in the hospital, and it just it did it. Of course, when somebody you love is
Of
sick, it
course.
changes things
You-
drastically.
So did you guys have these deep conversations, or did you joke around, or?
We always joked around. He
Okay.
knew how much I loved him. He's was my daughter's godfather. You know, my daughter had before he passed, which obviously everybody must know that that happened at this
Yeah.
point. He she had asked him to be her godfather. By this time, she's about 6 years old,
Oh,
and
wow.
he had been a pretty steady male figure in
Uh-huh.
her life. And you know, we would talk about Akela. I'd take her with me, you know, to see him. And that was also an important aspect of it because at her age, I made sure that I asked her if I told her that he was sick. And I asked her, do you want to be part of this journey? Because this is what's going to happen. Even though we didn't know he was going to pass, he
Mhm.
was having treatment, he was losing his hair, all these things were changing. And she made the decision that she did want to be
Okay.
there.
Now, was this in the meantime when you met Ray, your husband, too?
I did. I met my husband. Uh, he already let's see, they had met already. Yeah, I had already been seeing my husband because I met Ray in 2001.
Okay.
So yeah, they had met. They hit it off greatly,
Okay.
and they became really good friends too. So yeah, it
Because
was.
I remember Ray is such a cool guy, and he seems like, this is my impression.
Uh,
He's a balanced one. He's just like, I've never seen Ray get worked up or really like scream fast or go crazy. He just seems
right. Yeah, he doesn't do
like,
that.
it's like Jennifer with me.
Yeah.
She's my balance.
Oh yeah, definitely.
She's definitely my balance because I would be all over the place.
He's the love of my life. We are complete opposites. Like literally, there's not a lot that we agree on, so we have a lot of really great discussions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did meet my husband. You married us years later in 2007 we got married. But
You know, it's
yeah,
interesting. You're the only one who gets married at a cemetery.
it was awesome. It's beautiful there. You know, it was beautiful.
I know it was a gorgeous
Married and
one.
buried, Kevin.
You got married at Glendale. What's it
Forest
called?
Lawn.
Forest
Glendale
Lawn.
Forest Lawn. Yeah.
Forest Lawn. It was a beautiful wedding.
Yes.
I remember there was a bell that
Mm-hmm.
that you two rang
Uh-huh.
once I pronounced you husband and wife. Do you remember that?
I think Akela pulled it and the rose petals fell down.
Yeah, or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was awesome.
It was a
It was
beautiful
beautiful
wedding.
place. Yeah.
It was a beautiful wedding. And so then what's interesting to me looking at this, um, we forgot to talk about your parents were going through a divorce when I was going through a divorce at the same time.
Yes.
And how is that? Because I just remember your dad and I became so tight during that
Yeah.
because we could commiserate together.
Exactly.
You know, the thing is, I've always believed this, that you don't bond through success, you bond through grief.
Right.
And so your dad and I would do walks
Mm-hmm.
all the time
Right.
and just repeat the same thing over and over again, like, what
We
just
hate women
happened
who
to
will never
us?
get married.
Yeah. I kept saying, Fern, let's just turn gay because
Right?
this woman thing's not going to work out for us, you know. But one of the things is I admire about your dad is he never went negative on your mom.
Neither one of them ever did.
Yeah,
Neither one of them ever did. It's amazing to me. And I mean, until my dad was gone, they were always just the epitome of respect when they were in
yeah,
the same place. You know, my mom and stepdad and my dad and stepmom sat on the same row, you know, when I got married,
yeah,
sat at the same table at the reception,
right.
you know, just always respect. And they taught me that. And I love them.
I think that's an incredible lesson that most marriages don't understand.
Hmm.
Um, because you knew my ex, Sandy,
Yes.
and it's the
Yes.
same thing. It's a total respect for one another. We just never went crazy, like the cycle, whatever,
Right.
what we call. And we got defensive when other people call them names,
Right.
and stuff like that. Where do you think that came from with your parents, the respect for each other? Because we know that it wasn't a mutual thing. It was just,
Yeah.
that they went through a divorce. And
Yeah.
so,
They were in their marriage, they were just always respectful of each other, at least from what I saw. I think
right,
as a child, you never know what goes on behind closed
yeah,
doors. So I don't pretend to
right.
know all the ins and outs, but um, they were like that with everyone in their life.
Okay,
And so I think it was just who they are. I mean, my mom, she's still here and she's very much that way.
right.
And my dad always was just very respectful. And I think people have to respect the institution
Mm,
that at some point, I think, knowing both you and Sandy, at some point in your life, you guys loved each other enough to get married and have a relationship. And I think that, you know, that doesn't get enough respect sometimes, especially, in these circumstances. And when children, you and Sandy have chosen to stay in contact, but when there's children involved, families have to stay in contact. So
yeah,
there has to be respect, I think.
no,
Um,
absolutely. And then what's interesting too is that you and
my babies.
your babies, you and Ray decided to have children,
Yes.
to continue the children. Tell me about your daughters.
So that's Nyla. The older one is Nyla. She's going to be 11 actually on Friday,
Okay,
and the little one is Annika. Um, and Annika just turned 4 in June.
okay.
Um, so Annika was born when I was 40 years old. She's my little wild child. Um, they're both insanely smart,
Of course.
and I love them so much. They
Yeah.
look just like my husband, as you can see. They look nothing like me. They're amazing. They're amazing kids.
No, and they're beautiful kids too. They're really beautiful kids.
Thank you.
And I know it's important for you to have your kids involved in your grandparents' life,
Yes.
and when I grew up, my grandmother died when I was probably 6 or 7, and my
Right.
grandfather lived in Edinburgh, Scotland. So
Right.
I did not experience what it's like to have grandparents. And I think that's
Right.
one thing that was very important to you. Now let's go back to your dad,
Mhm.
Fernando. Now, one commonality that you and I have is both of our parents began to develop dementia or Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't think anyone really understands what it's like to have a parent start to lose their minds. And so, do you remember when you first accepted the fact that Fernando, your dad, was developing dementia?
I remember when he told me.
Oh,
Um,
he told you?
yeah, he told me.
Wow.
He told me, and in my dad's normal fashion, he was more worried about me
Uh,
than if I would ever develop it. And I just tried to reassure him.
right.
Oh God, I'm gonna cry. Sorry.
Okay.
um, that and I told him, Dad, hopefully by that time, if that does happen, they'll have found some cure for this. I
Right.
remember that day so specifically. We were at uh, Caro's or Coco's in Montebello, and he kept asking me, "Why are we here?"
Oh,
So that was already pretty far into it. I think that was the Father's Day before he actually passed away in the November.
yeah, because my mother's still alive,
I know,
and
amazing.
it's been 12 years.
Hmm.
12 years, and
Wow.
they tell, and this is maybe you would understand this. I always tell people you can't grieve because they're still there,
No, you can't.
but you grieve because they're not there.
Oh,
And, and it's like, it's just a horrible, because I'm a mama's boy
mhm.
and you're a daddy's girl. I mean, you're definitely a daddy's girl. And I'm telling you right now, nobody listens to this podcast. You were your dad's favorite. You know that, right? I mean, I can tell
I
you
think
right
I was
now,
just the baby. That's what happened.
whatever it is, I guarantee those talks and talks and talks was very respectful of Brenda, but man, he was worried and loved you to death. I mean, he
Thank you.
cared
Thank
deeply
you.
about you. So again, you talked about Victor. You had these prayer things.
Mm-hmm.
To me, let me just tell you how I went when my mother was diagnosed with, and we figured it out before it was
Right.
diagnosed. My prayer life was, how do you pray this for this to go away?
Right.
You know, her memory to come back. I mean, it's just, to me, I'm just going, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got, did you have a hard time accepting it like I did?
I did. I think I got very angry. I got very angry. And I I just didn't want to believe that it was happening. I tried to find a way to talk myself out of it, I guess. And dad, maybe it's this, and dad, maybe it's that. And actually after his diagnosis for a long time, he stayed very steady.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just kind of went downhill. So we had a lot of good moments for a long time. So
Right,
it took a long while, I think, for me to be like, oh, this is actually happening.
right.
You know, when he stopped driving, when he couldn't drive anymore, when things started to happen, and yeah, it's a very difficult thing to accept, because I think, like what you said, you're grieving every single time. I lost my dad long before I lost my dad.
Right, right. Oh,
I, and the relationship just changes, because you kind of become the parent. You're no longer the parent. I mean, you're no longer the
yeah.
child.
Yeah.
That father-daughter relationship isn't there. And he would have these moments of clarity that I would just like grab onto, and I remember one time he grabbed my face and he said, "Hey, you're so beautiful."
Mm,
And I said, "Well, thanks. Like, you made me, I look like you." And
uh,
he said, "Oh, that's right. You do," and he would just look into my eyes sometimes and just be so present. And then other times, just ask me a lot of questions. And I never gave him the opportunity to forget me.
uh,
I really would just be like, when I saw him, I'd be like, "Hey, Dad, how are you?" So that
yeah.
he didn't have to be like, "Who is this person?" you
What-
know, and he was always responsive to that. So I feel blessed that in a way the Lord took him before he really didn't know who I was.
Right. And the thing is, what for me too is when I'm watching this, those clarity moments, I just remember it was Christmas and I was playing these Christmas songs on this little machine and my mother started to sing
Oh,
and she knew the words to the song. And I remember like crying inside, going, she's clear.
mm-hmm.
And so every time I would talk to my mom or something, I can't sing word jack, but I would play old Christian songs and she knew the words. And I was going, how do they do this?
My dad would do the same thing with like oldies. I'd put on like some oldie, and all of a sudden he'd be like, "Mija, that's a good one." And then he'd start singing it like "Rock Around the Clock" or something.
Right.
And he'd want to get up and dance. And I'm like, my stepmom would be like, "He can't get up and dance." I'm like, "Well, we're gonna try, I guess, because that's what he
Yeah.
wants to do." you know but music, just really same thing with my dad. Like, once I started playing the older music, he would know the words, and he'd just sit there and listen, and he'd love it.
Yeah. So going back to me, I was going
Yes.
back to me. Let's talk about me. Uh,
Okay, let's make it about you, Kev.
no, we're not going to talk about me. My prayer life completely changed because my mother was my stability.
Mm.
And I remember, you remember Bob Bonnick.
Yes.
Yeah. I was so mad at God because I was thinking, I can understand you taking her home with cancer. I can understand you taking her home with another illness, but this is the worst illness ever
Mhm.
because I don't know where she is. I don't know where she is because it got to the point where she would talk about her kids, but she wouldn't recognize me anymore. And then
Mhm.
she wouldn't talk. And I remember Bob was telling me that he asked me, and I think I told you this when because every once in a while I'll call Summer and just to commiserate. Okay, anyone, because when your dad was around, I just go, "How are you doing? How are you feeling?" Because
Yeah.
I just needed someone that's going through
Yeah.
what I'm going through, because
Yeah, for sure.
with this kind of stuff, you just feel totally isolated.
Mhm.
And Bob asked me, "Is your mother's soul sick?" And I just remember going, "What a no." And he said that he believed it was from God to tell me that my mother's soul is already connecting with God,
Mhm.
and that the soul does not necessarily need to be connected to the body all the
Mhm.
time. And it just alleviated so much stress for me because
And I remember you told me that, I think when my dad, during that time when my dad was going within the 10 days before he passed. And I remember, feeling peace with that because it is you're wanting to comfort somebody, but you don't know really, is he hearing me? Is he not hearing me? What mental state is he really in? And um, you know, that did bring so much comfort,
right,
because at that point, he was ready and I wasn't. I wasn't ready to be without him. And I
yeah,
think, like you said, your mom was your stability. I have two really great parents, and I think one of the things with my relationship with God is it's always been, it's a weird thing to say, but the aspect of God as the Father,
mm,
has been so tangible for me in my life
right,
because I had a father that was that way,
right,
as close as he could possibly be is what I would say. And but when my dad left, when he died, I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, I need to know I don't have a father." And I
right,
had my stepdad, amazing man,
right,
um, and had been filling those shoes since my dad got sick and helping me along. But it was very different.
right.
And yes,
Okay.
um, but I I had to learn how to be without my dad,
Right.
and I had to learn to put that on God. And there was a time, probably a year after my dad died, um, that God kind of said to me, "Hey, you've always put your dad kind of ahead of me in
Mm.
this respect, you know." And so, I had to repent for that. And ask for forgiveness. But when you have the real deal, sometimes,
Oh,
I
of
know not
course.
everybody's in the same position as I am. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been blessed with an amazing dad and an amazing stepfather,
Right.
who have been great to me. Both are now in heaven. Um,
See, this is where, because your stepdad just passed recently, not too long ago.
yeah, it'll be a year in September.
Okay. So, and see those stupid anniversaries that come out just brings all kinds of memories, like it's September. So, the thing is, in a sense, you lost two fathers.
I did.
And so, I'm looking at this and I'm going, and this is why I want to interview you because I'm thinking, okay, Summer has a choice. She has a choice to, I'm not going to emotionally connect with anybody because I'm going to lose them, or what? What do you do? Because if I was you, I would say, I'm not loving anybody anymore.
My that hope in eternity is really big for me.
Okay.
You know, we've talked about just a few people I've lost. I've lost very good friends, like my childhood friend passed suddenly. I had another really good friend pass suddenly. A lot of, like, if you ask me the theme of my life, I would probably say grief and loss. But God has been constant, and he doesn't go away. It doesn't always turn out the way we want it.
Right.
And I think with Victor, I think specifically, I remember those days in the ICU before he passed, and I remember praying and praying and praying for God to heal him, for God to heal him, for God to heal him.
Right.
And then I remember suddenly my prayer was just, Lord, you have to take him.
Right.
He will never be who he wanted to be at this point. And you were there, you went there. I called you and you came and prayed for him.
Yeah.
And you gave me a word too, that he was okay and that he was going to be with the Lord. And I remember just being so feeling so much peace, about that. But it's not easy. It's not easy. My stepdad had cancer. It was a long journey. He was diagnosed when I was pregnant with my youngest. And mind you, since my dad was diagnosed when my middle one was born, she only had my dad for a short time before his disease took over.
Right.
So to my two younger children, Rick is grandpa, the only grandpa, and they've lost. My little one never knew my dad, but it's all you can do is hope in Christ. And I think that sounds so cliche. It really does sound cliche, but that's all we have.
Yeah.
That's all we have in these situations. And I think God surrounds us with amazing people to help us through those things. And I don't know, I think it's only him. Right. He's the strength. I spend a lot of time, listening to worship music, and I also think that being as honest with God as possible, right, about how you're feeling.
So you bent to God. You just say,
yeah, I'm mad. This is not supposed to be happening. Right. Why would you do this now?
Right.
Why is this happening? I can remember, I don't know how much time we have, but I can remember a specific instance. I mentioned my older daughter and this young boy she was with, and I remember God telling me to pray for this kid, right? Like he's telling me, you need to pray for him. And I'm like,
and you don't like him.
Yeah, well, we had major issues, right? Yeah, major issues. And I was like, yeah, and I'm telling him, like, are you crazy? Like, why do I need to pray for this kid? Like, I want him out of the life of my life, and you're asking me to pray for him. And unbeknownst to me at that time, because my daughter didn't find out she was pregnant till she was 28 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
That's a whole other story. But unbeknownst to me, this time when God's asking me to pray for this kid, my daughter's already carrying his child.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, that's my baby, my big baby. She's going to be 26. My little mini me, that's what everybody says. And I have a grandson also, but
you're a grandmother at 45 years old.
I am. But there's those times when he asks us to do things and you're just like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
But then I completely understood. When I found out my daughter was pregnant, I'm like, of course I need to be praying for this kid, because
he's going to be in your life for a while.
He's going to be in my life. And I have a beautiful grandson, and I wouldn't, change that.
Right. And the thing is, what's interesting, because knowing that you were 13 years old, and now you have this beautiful big family now, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
so that gives you joy. So I want to ask you two questions, and you
Okay.
don't have to don't answer. How'd your mom do it? Because it's got to be hard on her too. Not only just because you go through a divorce doesn't mean you don't still care and love your husband that brought you in life, but then she
Yes.
lost another husband due to cancer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um, she's okay.
okay.
My mom's strong. She I didn't give you a picture of my mom, man. No. No, she was in the picture of Rick and I and her.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all three of us. But
30 years ago.
she's
Yeah.
she's good. I was with her today because we're in
Okay.
the process of putting the house on the market. We were cleaning there today. Um,
She's a
we
sweet.
cry a lot. We laugh a lot.
Mhm.
Um, she's my rock,
Yeah. And
and
she is a sweet, sweet person.
she loves you,
Mhm.
and I don't know. My mom had a hard upbringing, so
Yeah.
it's always so amazing to me to look at
Right.
how she ended up being such a great mom. And um, I think, I've heard you talk about this a little bit. We really need to learn about each other, which
Yeah.
is what you're doing, because we don't know each other's stories.
Mhm.
We don't know each other's stories, and our stories um, make us relate to each other and make us be
Absolutely.
kinder to each other, especially at this time. Just understanding where people come from,
Right.
you know?
I've noticed the last question I want to ask you, you posted something on your Facebook
Uh-oh.
that I go, how in the world does she do this? So what I decided to do, I decided to show you in front of everyone what you posted
Okay.
and have you explain it to me. You said this, I'm not a product of my circumstances, but I'm a product of my decisions. Now, whoever this Stephen Covey is, that's a deep statement.
He's the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
Okay.
I think.
So
Um,
tell me why that was so important to you and all the stuff you've gone through. Because basically, this is you. This is the whole story that you just told us. That basically. So why did you post that, and why was it so important to you? That's how I kind of want to end this interview.
because I think all of us in life, sometimes we don't make the best, you know, I don't want to say the best decisions because it's talking about I'm a product of my decisions, but
Right.
sometimes the way we grow up isn't the best. Sometimes the way a relationship we get into isn't the best, but you have to make the right decisions
Right.
along the way, and I don't think one hard decision changes the course of your life,
Right.
at least for me. And I try to make the best decisions possible. And I think for me, I am very lucky that I grew up in a very loving household with very loving parents, but
Mhm.
I know many people that weren't. And some of them have turned out amazingly,
Right.
but some of them also use that to continue to make bad decisions.
Right.
Um, and I think at some point in your life, you have to kind of just own it
Right.
and use it to your advantage.
No. Well, thank you so much, Summer. I really appreciate it. And it's interesting watching somebody since they're 13 years old grow all the way into their mid 40s. And you're right. There's circumstances that happened to you that you
Hmm.
had control, you didn't have control, but decisions that you make. And one of the themes that I've seen in your life that you chose never to play a victim. And I just admire that in you. And I think that your marriage is real solid to what I see. And I'm just so happy for you. You have a beautiful family. Not perfect. We're all not perfect.
Not perfect.
We're not the Brady Bunch sometimes, but we are. Your family does love and care for each other. So
Definitely.
thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you think it's important, share it with somebody that's going through similar circumstances. And God bless you.